Well, welcome everybody to the next panel, Decentralization as a Public Good. So I'm Elle Liberté, and I'm very excited about the panel that we have today. We have some fantastic people speaking. We've talked quite a bit already about decentralization and looking at the tension between centralization and decentralization. This panel is very specifically, as you can see, talking about it as a public good. So I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. And I'm going to start off by asking our wonderful panelists to do a quick introduction. Michael, if you would like to start. Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm Michael. I'm the Minister of Justice of Liberland. We're building the freest country in the world in the real space in the south of Europe between Croatia and Serbia. Our president just spoke and told you all about it. So let's do it. Let's build Liberland.
Yes. Craig, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm Dr. Craig Wright. I'm the guy who created the shit show that we're seeing now because of making Bitcoin. I'm the chief scientist and a few other things with nChain. nChain's basically a research, development, and commercialization company. My goal is very simple. By the end of this decade, I plan to scale things so that we can have around 10 billion transactions a second at under 1,000th of a cent.
Thank you. Marlene, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Marlene Murphy. I'm from the finance and banking industry. Formerly worked for Fortune 500 companies and international financial institutions, as well as UAE's central bank. And now an entrepreneur. I lead my own company. It's called The Entrepreneurs in the creative media. And I also do digital assets management and consulting. I am based in Dubai, and I'm so glad to be joining this stage with all these amazing speakers this afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. Democracy for all.
Thank you. And Laurie.
Hey, good afternoon. Are we the last act as well? Are we the last ones on the stage?
We are, yes.
Okay, so I'm very happy that you have so many people still with us. So I'm Lauri. I represent the Republic of Estonia, and we have a small program called e-residency. So to date, I think we have roughly 100,000 e-residents, so probably the sort of biggest number of electronic ID documents distributed outside of the country to citizens of other countries in a form of a digital service, very decentralized. So I think the panel fits really well.
Okay, so we have a number of big nuanced concepts here. So we've been talking a bit about the way into discussing this. And Craig, I wondered if we could start with you, because I know that in addition to being a computer scientist, you're also a philosopher, and you've done a number of different educational programs on YouTube defining the nation state and the history of society. I very much enjoyed watching those. And maybe we could start with you, and we could have a look at the definition of decentralization and then see where we go from there.
So to put on a philosopher's hat, and one of the first things philosophers usually do to bore the you-know-what out of everyone is to define terms. And that's a critical aspect of any discussion. If we're going to actually talk and define what we want to actually argue about, we need to understand what the foundation of it is. And the word decentralization has many meanings. In computer science, a distributed network is there because it makes a system that is robust. When you have multiple copies of a machine, then attacking one doesn't bring down everything. However, there are multiple meanings of the word and multiple ways of talking about this. We can talk about the decentralization of power, the distribution of control. But then what is power? In a blockchain, there's two ways of having it. You can either have a system developed and controlled by entities, usually developers, or you can have no power. The way I envisioned Bitcoin was the rules don't change. If the rules don't change, even I don't have power over the system other than what I can bring into in competition. Because when an individual cannot change anything, then you have to compete on the existing rules. When you allow someone, like in Ethereum, to decide what change is going to occur, then you choose the winners, you choose the losers. If I can sit there and say, these are the new rules, that's never non-political. Whenever you make a rule change, then one company who has planned something, developed something, put in a project that may take years to come to fruition, now has to change and basically alter their trajectory. And doing that costs money. So you always, in allowing changes to rules, have political decisions that alter who wins and loses. So decentralization can mean of voting, of power, of robustness. We have to actually sit there and decide what we mean when we mean the word decentralization before we can have a good conversation.
Thank you. Well, I wonder if you could talk a little bit, just to start off, thank you for pointing us in the right direction around the concept of decentralization. I know that a lot of people advocate for decentralization, whereas you've talked in the past about how there needs to be a tension in some way, and that not everything should be decentralized. Is that something you can speak to, and then we'll pass it around a bit?
Britain, America, most of what we call democracies aren't democracies for a reason. I have arguments with a lot of Americans because no one in America seems to understand their own system anymore. It's a republic. In Britain, it's a constitutional monarchy. And that's an important distinction. The American system, if you read Federalist Paper number 10 by Madison, he describes, looking at the classical Greek ideas by Plato, Aristotle, etc., the problems with democracy. If it's a pure democracy, why don't you just allow the vote of the majority? And there are problems with majority vote. Hitler was voted in by a majority. Mm-hmm. If you think about it for a moment, majorities cause lots of problems. Rwanda was a majority, and yet we had genocide. So constitutional republics limit the rights people have. The majority doesn't have a right over the minority. And remember, the ultimate minority is always the individual. So we don't want pure demagoguery. We don't want a system where a tyrant can come in there and stir up the masses and have a political dissent movement that basically just has people at each other's throat. We don't want to devolve into infighting between different national groups, because we can always splinter people. We can always go back to the situation we had before the Westphalian sort of compromise in Europe. These guys are Catholics. These guys are Protestants. Oh, but you're the wrong type of Protestant. You're the wrong type of Catholic. Oh, no, you're Orthodox. We all hate you. I mean, oh, no, you're Jewish. Oh, no, you're etc. And we can just sit there and pick on something endlessly. So what we want is a system we can all agree on, because even in democracies, in a republic where we want to vote, we need to think not only of the now, we need to think of the future, our children, and the past. And the past is important. If you think for a moment, if you want to leave a legacy, that means something that you create now will be available in the future. If we look at this building here, if we go around Catalonian territory, this isn't because of democracy. It is because of aristocrats and nobles and people who spent their own money. And even in America, there is a new type of aristocrat. But if you look at Carnegie, nearly 50% of all of the libraries in America were built by Carnegie with his money. And people hate him and think he sucks, and he's a bastard, and he's tight, and he's mean, and so am I. But that's the fun thing with capitalism. Unlike the mercantilist system that Facebook and Silicon Valley are trying to create, the anti-profit driven, sort of anti-rules driven system of community and likes, there's a very simple thing when you have to fight and work and create. It doesn't matter who likes you anymore. It matters what you deliver. It matters whether you add value. And people can hate you and still think you add value. Now, what we need to get to again is a system where we build things, create things. Like this building wasn't there because the democracy voted it. This building is here because a few nobles thought that it would be great to leave a legacy that maybe 1,000 years from when they built it will be here. And that's what we need to think about as well. We need to think more than, can I have a 1960s style ugly building because it's cheap and we'll fit lots of people in it, lots of people who never want to live there? Can we build something that people will be proud, not only now, but in the future to live in?
Thank you, Craig. Well, interestingly here we have a very interesting configuration actually, because we have a number of different very interesting jurisdictions represented, or interpretations of the modern state. We have, of course, Liberland, which is a startup country. We have Dubai represented, which is pioneering within free special economic zones. And then, of course, we have Estonia with its e-residency. I actually come from, I live in a special economic zone in Mexico called Churan-Kerry, Independent Autonomous Indigenous Zone. So I think this is going to be quite an interesting conversation. I'd like to start with you, Michael, and talking about your vision within the constitution of Liberland and what it is you're really trying to achieve there. I know that you're going for a decentralized model as much as possible, but you're right in the hot seat of actually pioneering a whole new state, as it were. So we'd love to hear from you, your interpretation.
Yes, well, Liberland has had the idea of decentralization from the very start, from its inception, in its genes. That's why I said, let's build Liberland. I know not all of you are Liberlanders, but everybody can remember that there is this project and can perhaps contribute. So we are building a nation and not just a state. That's the first, like the zero layer of decentralization. And that nation is a propositional one, like the old United States used to be. And it's the freedom lovers. And that's why I spoke optimistically perhaps of us. So next step is to create a government which will have decentralization. For that we put together ideas of from states where decentralization works to a degree, and add new ideas from DAOs and blockchain systems which seem to also give results. It is a creative work as well as a compilation, as well as adoption of that what is tried and tested and what works. So we are a mix of direct democracy or Swiss democracy and corporate governance. There is a part of our government where people can decide directly and people can vote in or repeal laws. That repeal part is very important. We wish quite desperately for people to feel that they are governed according to their true interest. There is no mandate to a representative here who does not represent you, because you can fire him. I wouldn't want to be represented at court by a lawyer I can't fire or I can't instruct directly. I just vote for him once per 4 years. That doesn't happen in Liberland. You can be represented. We understand the benefits of that, but it's your choice to give your vote to that representative or to take it back at any time you want. And every 3 months, our election cycle is very short, you will be able to repeal that representative from the Congress in total, not just remove your vote, but remove him from or her from the office. So this is the basis. It's a mix between centralization of a government, so because that's useful. That's like when you have a company, you have management. It's a few people who are experts and who decide what's going on. It's not that the shareholders decide every little spending, like we're going to hire a janitor. Let's have an expert for that, but let's have a system where the lowest, like the most basis level stakeholders, the people, the citizens, can influence their decision-making without making the whole edifice unworkably complicated. So that's the idea.
Fantastic, thank you. Laurie, as the Managing Director of the Estonian e-residency program, I know that you're opening up residency to the world and challenging these concepts that you have to live and do business in the same place, but in fact you can choose where you might want to have your business registered, and you're making that simple and accessible for people around the world. But I think what people perhaps don't know is actually you were the first country to pioneer blockchain technology for your citizen data program. And in fact, you'd already put it into place in 2008, actually a year before the launch of Bitcoin. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, but maybe just to start off on the topic of decentralization and decentralization of services, as well as democracy for all. So, at least to me, democracy also means freedom of choice, like a lot of it. I mean, of course, it's not the whole concept, but a lot of it stands on freedom of choice. And then when we have centralized services, then what are we lacking? We are desperately lacking freedom of choice, right? And everybody's so used to that services are centralized, and you have to get all the services you have from the country where you reside or where you live. But then what that also means is that there is no competition. You are a captive audience. And then if you are a captive audience, and usually what happens to the service, what happens to the product? Does it get better? Usually it doesn't, right? So if we've had experience in all of our countries to have big business monopolies, then also the product, the service they were offering wasn't too good. So in that sense, decentralization of services, I think, is really sort of paramount to creating more competition for different services to be offered by different countries or other entities, actually, if they are better at this. So it's like, let's say, if a car registration service in a particular country is particularly bad, then why shouldn't you be able to use another one? Like, what's really stopping it from happening, especially in this day when everything is digital, can be put on a blockchain, and these registers are much more safe, much more secure than a kind of a paper-based filing system in someone's office, in someone's cabinet. So yeah, as you mentioned, Estonia was quite early on the blockchain. We started experimenting, testing on the government level 2008, I believe. It was like middle of 2008. And the first system that went live were succession registry, later on land registry, exactly the kind of systems where you want to make sure that nobody's meddling with the data, that nobody's changing it. Even the government officials themselves, they can't kind of go in through some back door and change something. So I think in that sense, blockchain as a technology, and there are different ones. We are using a one called KSI. You can Google it as an Estonian invention as well, to some extent. So there are different ones, basically. They're really, really good for this kind of system where you need to keep records and where you need those records to be immutable. And you can also prove that these records were not changed illegally.
Thank you. Marlene, you're the founder of Tech for Good, and I know that you're a big advocate for best practice in technology. You also live in Dubai, which is right on the cutting edge, so you're right in the hot seat of technology implementation in society. What are your concerns about the way it's going in terms of decentralization?
Thank you, Ali. First, let me start with defining what is decentralization to me. Decentralization as a public good in the financial world, in the finance world, is good. Let's look at DeFi, the decentralized finance is good because of its permissionless capability of getting away from depending on institutions for oversight. And second to that would be the immutability, the assurance of security, and most of all, the transparency, because in decentralized finance, it records all activities and transactions on the blockchain network. And it's also worth noting that the setbacks of it, the setbacks would be scalability, uncertainty, and concerns of liquidity, as well as shared responsibility. On the other hand, let me speak also about the tech world of good, mentioned earlier. It is about connecting the technology to the people. It's about humanizing the technology. And we're providing the platform for the less fortunate, the economically unprivileged sector of our community, to have a platform for them to learn and educate on about technology and keep them updated on the technological advancement that we are going through in the world.
Thank you. Craig, I'm interested to hear your reaction. I don't know if you knew about the case of Estonia using the blockchain in 2008.
It's actually after that, because I hadn't released Bitcoin until 2009, but I do know about it. My first comment would be to do with Liberland. If I want to have an election every 3 months, I can move to Italy.
You can.
Exactly.
But it's not the same, because there it's not a part of the system. There it's a bug.
Oh, it's totally part of the system. Every 3 months you get a new politician.
Yeah, you do.
Next, the issue isn't immutable ledgers, and there's no encryption in Bitcoin. The pure sort of idea is it's an audit system. Every transaction can be visible. So it's not whether someone can change something. You can alter records, you can update them. Even in Bitcoin, they're fixable, they're able to be changed, but it's publicly visible.
Transparency.
So it's transparent, as you said. So the issue isn't that I have something that no one can alter. The issue is more that I have transparency. And if I'm making competing systems, like I'm in Britain, what I would want in an NHS system isn't the government controls it. I would want the government has oversight and sets rules and allows doctors to compete. So if I get a lower wait time, if this doctor wants to work harder, right now the NHS, they say this guy can only work so many hours. If I want to work extra time, good. Why should a government tell me I can't work 20 hours a day if I want to work 20 hours a day? You can go, oh, it's not fair to other people. So what? If I want to work harder, I should be able to. If I want to build my business so that it's more efficient, I should be able to. That's really what competition's about. So opening up the transparency so that the government services can be viewed by everyone and be totally open is important. But also, what we're talking about, I mean, part of where people go wrong with, I mean, why did Dubai become Dubai? It was said that it would be bankrupt. I mean, people now, I was over in Saudi yesterday and I was talking to some friends there, and I was explaining how in the late 90s, Dubai was facing bankruptcy because the downturn in the market meant that there were debts due, and everyone was going, this won't work. You can't build a city. But it wasn't a democracy that built a city. It was one man and his family and someone with a dream. When Bill Gates created Microsoft, you can hate him all you want, but it's an individual. And part of all of this is allowing individuals to have the ability to create something, whether they're liked or not, and build something and have something that will enable that creation. So with what you're talking about, the idea here is, well, it does scale. I mean, we can already do hundreds of thousands of transactions a second. But it's all about opening up and making it transparent so that not that people have the right to change anything anytime, but they can see it and they can have oversight. That's really the biggest problem we have in government. We don't know where the money's being spent. Yeah.
Michael, how does that resonate with you with the vision for Liberland?
Oh, definitely. Liberland is kind of like between two fires, because we want the people to have oversight, just like you said, and they do. That's the repealing laws and regulations part, and they also can vote in and propose those regulations. But the focus is here on the repealing, our big desire for people to be able to say we live under the regulation which we have influence on, while and the other one is of course to let the men or women of inside do their thing. That's in our government, that's the cabinet, that's the thing which lasts, unlike the Congress, for much longer. That's the professionals, which the Congress can repeal under certain conditions, but who are able to set their goals and guide the project. So we want to create a space where people who are not politicians, who are entrepreneurs, visionaries, community builders, can do their thing without too much regulation. And in order to affect that, we have those two fires or pillars that enable this, because in theory and in practice, we see that people want to be left alone to live and let live. That's the people. And they appoint professionals who are good at their job to allow for this to be undisturbed. Because no regulation doesn't mean freedom. Sane and lean regulation affords freedom for humans, because society is our new nature, so to say. We're social animals. We have to have some kind of a regular way how to do things, right? But it's too much in our current states. So that's kind of my few cents about this.
Laurie, I was wondering, with the e-residency program, to what extent would you say that Estonia is perhaps moving towards a governance as a service model in terms of opening itself up to, or recognizing a global marketplace in terms of where people can move to or do business? Do you think it's kind of opening up that environment in that way?
Well, sure. I think also it's precedented before, right? So it just have been maybe less services, maybe like some countries are very popular as a flag country for your ship carriers, then they're offering this kind of ship registry service. But usually these services have been very physical, but the world is getting more digital. Software is eating the world, as they say, right? So the more the world is becoming digital, the less there is a reason that all your services have to come from one place. You'd much rather want them to be from the best provider, in a way. Let's think about how we consume media, for example. You have your Netflix, you have your Apple TV, you have your local TV stations. You're not locked in to only one of them. You can choose, right? So the moment services become digital, then the question of, okay, but why do they have to be provided only in one physical location, or only to people with a very specific date of birth or place of birth, actually becomes a little bit irrelevant. So we should maybe rethink these topics.
And Marlene, I know that in Dubai, they're really, really pushing forward with a lot of concepts of integrating blockchain. Do you think that is because they have a vision for some kind of decentralization within the country? Already they are a free trade zone, but what is the motive, do you think, for this massive pioneering spirit within blockchain and decentralized technologies in the UAE?
Well, there are certain groups in the UAE, really. As you know, that UAE is rapidly advancing in terms of what they have in the market in the UAE. So we said that it is a proven fact that there are still some groups there that are left behind, that we need to onboard them, and to update them and put them at the same level as everyone in order to speed up the understanding of the technology and what's going on around us. So we created this initiative that addresses, that connects and bridge the technology and the people. It is about humanizing technology, basically, that technology's responsibility to explain and make people understand on the usability of it, the usefulness of it to their lives and to their business, and as well as making the people embrace it, bridging the gap and connecting them to the technology and bridging the knowledge gap in the technology knowledge. So the platform itself provides a practical and useful technology education for the business community and for the entrepreneurs in the UAE.
Thank you. Well, leading on to you, Craig, I know that you see the ultimate expression of decentralization within the blockchain as being the peer-to-peer connectivity. So, to Marlene's point, does that require a certain level of education? Is that what's missing at the moment in society, and how can we bridge that gap?
Very much so. So first of all, I'm going to approach the topic of DeFi. DeFi is not new. 1929, we had DeFi. And people opened up new forms of shares and trading, and then we had 1929. And we had the same thing happen in the 80s with pink sheets, the same thing, Wolf of Wall Street, the same thing happened again with web IPOs. Web IPOs were a distributed, decentralized, token-based asset issued between 96 and 99, where people sold all these new internet technologies that every one of them collapsed. Now, DeFi is just a way of saying, I don't have responsibility. So that's part of what education is. It's understanding responsibility. And there's two parts to this. One is people seem to get education wrong. Education, if we go back to Vanity Fair, there was an article published in 1932 on the value of useless information. And that's part of what we're not teaching anymore. Useless information is critical because vocational training is an education. I mean, I've got degrees in mathematics and computer science and physics and chemistry, and I will tell you, basically, philosophy is important. Political science is important. I study history extensively for a reason, because that's education. And education is very different to vocational sort of learning. You learn mathematics to do something. You learn computer programming to do something. You get educated so you understand why, where things have gone wrong before, what society can do better. And where you're talking about engaging people, Britain at one stage ruled the world. It had some of the smartest people, but it actually had an education program. Not we're going to teach people math or anything like this. Scotland produced some of the most brilliant philosophers at the time, Hume, Adam Smith, because the government decided, I'm going to spend this money because the returns on the money were more to society overall, over the life of that. It was about we teach people, we educate them to be responsible citizens, and that's the other part of decentralization when we're talking one to the other, accountability. If we don't learn accountability, we don't learn responsibility, then we get into all these current exchange problems that we're seeing, where no one wants to be responsible for any of the assets that they're trading of their customers. There's a reason we have rules against FTX trading customer assets, because if you do that and you lose everything, everyone loses. I used to work in the stock exchange in Australia. There are rules so that companies couldn't do that, because when they do that, they always fail, barring bank, because people traded other people's assets. So again, it comes back to teaching people to be responsible. And that's not just teaching them math, it's teaching them history, geography, all these boring things that we think aren't needed anymore.
I see you're nodding your head there a lot, Michael. I think it's this relationship between responsibility and also education. They seem to go hand in hand. And I know that education is something that's very important as part of the Liberland vision. Can you tell us about what incentives you're putting into place at the moment?
Well, I agree that it is a matter of education, but I think there is a deeper layer to this, and that is long-time preference, low-time preference, meaning that people learn and live in an environment which supports saving, thinking about the future, and just a long-term type of life, focus on the future, not discounting the future too much for the present. I mean, discounting it a little is okay because we don't know when we die, right? But in general, it is a good idea that people are focused on discounting, on not discounting the future rather, all too much, and making bigger projects just like this beautiful building. Those people who built this weren't thinking about only tomorrow and drink, eat, be merry, for tomorrow we die. They were thinking about their posterity and about their names, which were etched in stone, so to say. Well, and Liberland, by its live and let live approach, by its focus on Bitcoin and on its own merit currency, which has similar tokenomics, and on free trade, by its not having central bank, we want to stimulate this. And when you have this, when you have this environment for low time preference, people are actually see value in education and also in the, so to say, useless facts, that everything can play a role by creating an image as an educated person, getting the knowledge, actually being able to apply it, being able to see the results. If you do that, you'll start learning on your own, and you'll educate yourself in this way. So this is our way how we do it. We don't want to build schools, let the people do it.
Marlene, I see you nodding your head as well when it comes to, concepts of personal responsibility within society and empowering the individual to play an active role. How do you see that we can bridge this education gap and actively get the whole world, society engaged in being active members of governance and decentralization and technology? What's the bridge to that?
Right. I've been in the finance industry for long years, and I've come from traditional financial processing into the digital transformation. And really impressive the way we have available solutions now in the market. That really impressed me, Dr. Greg. And I know that DeFi is not new, it's been there, and we have already adapted to certain tailor-made programs from before. So digital transactions on finance was already there, but now it's more advanced, and it's more because it's work on the blockchain network. And in terms of empowering the community, yes, it is not just about educating them now, but we have to have a goal that sustains the results. You know, we have to aim for a result so that whatever we do now should have sustainable effects to the people, to their knowledge, and to the way they apply technology and their own activities and in their own business. So we continue to promote and build the network of technology companies, especially the social conscious businesses, that really aims at doing business at the same time providing social impact, making social impact to the people around the world.
Fantastic. So Laurie, I just wondered if you got any final comments you'd like to make, perhaps responding to some of the things that Craig and Michael said.
It's been a very interesting panel. I've really tried hard to find something to argue with, to make things more lively and interesting. But to be honest, I really have been agreeing to most of the points, especially about also the transparency and also about the education you brought forward. Maybe just one thing from my head to the latter part of this conversation is, you know, the world is set up in such a way that there are a lot of barriers between countries and also between businesses and between the regulators and the people who want to innovate. And these barriers are kind of okay if you're huge, right? If you're like a very large company, then you can afford to pave your way through that. You can lawyer up and you can hire enough consultants and tax accountants and whatnot. But that kind of world is not very great for the small and medium businesses and for startups especially, because they don't have so deep pockets to actually fight against all these barriers and traditions and whatnot that have been set up over the years. So in some ways I understand the concept of the free zone or to create a new country where you don't have any barriers to begin with, so everybody can kind of have a fresh start. So I find that really encouraging.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to all of you. I've really enjoyed all of your learned input into this complex and interesting subject. So thank you all very much. I think this concludes today's sessions, and thank you very much.